Hello and welcome to MotorInc First. Shumi's been coasting around for the very
on a
first
bike
time.
that, according to just before the recording started, grew wings.
Isn't that the biggest? I mean,
No, it's not the biggest.
it's the biggest talking point.
No, it's the one that is the most
Obvious.
frivolous of the whole thing.
So there are bigger, more important changes to the bike.
No.
Okay, so let's introduce the motorcycle that we're talking about. This is the TVS Apache RR 310.
2025
And
with winglets.
before he went for the
With
ride,
more performance.
before he,
With the same paint job.
what the? Okay, I'm going to just wait.
No, sorry. I'm so sorry. Please.
Before he went for the ride, there was one thing that Shumi said to me, right? And it made me literally sit up and made my eyes open wide. Do you remember what that was?
No. What did I say?
When did the RR 310 first come out?
Ah, yes.
It's so easy to forget that this bike has been around for so long.
Yeah. 11 years since BMW and TVS started working together. 7 years since this bike came out.
2016, right? Is when it 2017.
7 years ago is
Something,
how I remember
yeah.
it. So yeah, and if you were to go into all the significant updates that the RR 310 has received from then till now, thank you so much for watching. This is it. There's not much that has happened with this bike. So.
Okay, I'm gonna. So to me, the RR 310, whatever little bit I've seen on social, it looks pretty much the same to me from whatever I remember it earlier.
Yeah.
The only difference being the wings that are sticking out now. Winglets that are sticking out now.
Yes.
I'm assuming that I saw that there are some packs and all, which they had earlier as well.
Sure.
So I'm curious to know how they're different. And I'm wondering, they've got more performance out of this as well? No?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Okay. So look, the list of updates on this bike is almost frighteningly small. Okay. Visual change, the only visual change is there's a new grey color that has arrived.
Okay.
Nardo grey kind of thing. It is a nice looking color.
Okay.
No other panels have been changed in any way, form, fashion at all. Winglets have been added. We'll discuss the utility of the winglets in a bit. Second, no changes to the chassis at all. Suspension has been optimized a little bit further. I am assuming if I were to really go into it and TVS didn't actually give us all the details, then it would say something like when the downforce from the winglets arrived, then you needed a little bit more support kind of thing. Despite the changes in the tire import rules, still has Michelin Road 5s, which is awesome.
Awesome.
And when I asked them, how are you doing this? They all went silent. So clearly they figured out something that they don't want the competition to figure out at the very minimum. So, okay, whatever. Right.
So can you go to a TVS service center and buy Road 5s?
Yes. Also, Road 5s are now a generation older. As much as they're awesome tires, the Road 6 is actually the current tire. So, in one sense, the RR 310 still has fantastic tires. And in one sense, they are not the latest tires. Engine is where they've done some amount of work. I honestly cannot classify it as a lot of work. If you remember, on the RTR 310, they raised the performance. And on this bike, they've raised the performance even further. So, this is a 313cc motorcycle that is now making 38 bhp.
Wow.
Right? And if you remember, when I read the press release to you, you said, wow, that must vibrate a lot now. It doesn't. It is definitely more refined than it's ever been before.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I asked TVS, how did you manage to raise everything and keep vibration lower? And they basically said, and I quote, we went to the source of the problem. So this time, the RR 310 has a forged piston. Okay. It's, if I'm not mistaken, 5 or 6 grams lighter, which constitutes a 10 to 13% loss of weight. And since the piston's basically moving up and down in the cylinder at a very high velocity, and it's coming to a stop at TDC, it's coming to a stop at BTDC, you've removed one primary source of vibration. If TVS had to do more on the vibration front, I suspect that they don't need to anymore. We'll ride it on the street and confirm. We rode it only at the racetrack. Then they would have to look for lighter con rods and those elements that move up and down. No changes to the gearbox, no changes to the crank. But the top end of the engine is completely redesigned to account for the new compression, the new performance output, etc. So small changes to valve timings. major changes to the airbox and the intake and all of those kind of things. That's the net sum of the mechanical change on this motorcycle. They did the quick shifter, good quick shifter on the RTR 310, same quick shifter on the RR 310 with minor tweaking and tuning for this bike. That quick shifter started working at 2500 RPM, worked all the way till red line. Same here again. Below 2500, the quick shifter's off.
Just for clarification, this has more power than the RTR 310?
Yeah. I think that's 35, 36 PHP. This is 38.
But I remember one of the biggest complaints with the RTR 310 was that
more vibration.
Lots of vibrations, changes to the gearing, etc., which just made it feel great.
This bike has not gotten any fundamental changes.
Okay, so no gearing and none of that.
No fundamental changes. The engine makes more performance. It would have been even worse than the RTR 310 on vibration had TVS not put the forged piston in. Now I did, and it has attendant rings are changed and surface material, whatever. Then I asked TVS, can a RR 310 owner today go back, put this piston and enjoy a smoother motorcycle? They said, unfortunately, no. It's been tuned so far away from the current, from the previous state of tune that you won't be able to retrofit anything unless you spent a lot of money. And if you're going to spend that kind of money, you might as well just get a new bike. If you have an RR 310, buying one to replace it, or it doesn't constitute an upgrade or a good use of your money. So I would not do it. So in that sense, ergonomics, the only changes, TVS between the BTO and the stock model used to have two handlebar setups. One slightly more committed, one slightly more relaxed. TVS has decided that the feedback tells them the committed one is the more popular one. So this has the slightly more committed ergonomics. And you can purchase the higher clip-ons and bring them back to this bike if you like. Whereas I think, as I understand it, the previous bike was the opposite. It was the more relaxed setup, and you could bring it to a more committed state by buying one of the BTO kits. Just like before, the BTO kits exist. And just like before, I have seen no reason why you should buy them. I'll explain. So there's one BTO kit that brings you the adjustable suspension and stuff. And above that is the second BTO kit that adds the IMU and the IMU enabled cruise control and traction control and wheelie control and all of that, right? But the basic suspension setup of the RR 310 has actually always been great.
So what did you ride? You rode with the BTO?
What happened is we went to the Coast racetrack. That's Coast with a double T, which is in Coimbatore, nowhere close to the Coast, because it's the Coimbatore high performance something. So which is either Coast thing, which is a fantastic racetrack, but it's not ready yet. Okay, there's no curbs, there's no runoff. In that sense, trying to push a motorcycle through that racetrack is a little bit terrifying right now. And I think by December, curbs, runoffs will be done. And at that point, this will be a fantastic, challenging, interesting racetrack to ride, because it's up, it's down, it's got tightening corners, off-camber corners, and one section. And I get confused with the turn numbers because the racetrack isn't ready, I'll explain. But it's a left into a left into a left. And it's faster and faster and faster to the point where I'm struggling to make gear changes because I can't find space to put my boot in. You know, it's a very, very nice racetrack. Okay. What you need to know is the pit lane of this racetrack isn't constructed yet. So the lap actually begins at turn 8, 7 or 8. It's in the middle of 7 and 8. It's a 90-degree pit lane right now. And in that sense, it starts off weird, but the more laps you ride, the more I loved it. And we only had 20-minute sessions, but they feel like they go on for like half an hour, 40 minutes, because it's just so much work and so many turns and so much processing. I loved it. And to me, to learn a racetrack, you can't really do better than an RR 310. Right? The performance on the RR 310 will come to, but the chassis on the RR 310 has always been absolutely epic. Nothing has changed on that front. Right? TVS R&D guys said they'd been at the Coast track for a few days at that point of time. They'd figured out the right tire pressures, they'd figured out the right suspension settings, and we had set up motorcycles. Right? But I didn't get to play with the setup from mine because I was sharing my bike with two other people. And TVS used to group people based on their skill level, sort of. The fast guys were together, and for some reason this time they said no, we'll mix it up. So in my group, there were lots of very, very new riders. There were intermediate riders, and there were some of us who've ridden the racetrack a fair bit, and we know roughly what we are doing. TVS did the smart thing there. They put big white crosses on the racetrack, which you'll see in the GoPro footage. And the crosses are not as much as a ride here, as much as there are warnings saying this racetrack doesn't have runoff yet. It was a very good idea because I think everybody had a good ride, because those who were not confident knew what the expectation was, and those of us who were, let's say, a little bit more experienced knew how to process that line better, and how to use the crosses to orient ourselves. Perfect.
Awesome.
So the chassis was awesome, always remains awesome today. When you go really fast on the RR310 stock, you could run yourself out of ground clearance a little bit. Things could scrape, still happens. And you will see this scrape.
The pegs that typically.
And you will see this happen to a lot of stories where people will say the pegs scrape early. I will also warn you, when we teach at the school, people who are scraping their pegs a lot are usually people who are using a line where the throttle is not being opened early enough in a corner, which is the lack of ground clearance, which is going to cause the scraping. So it's not automatically a hardware issue. The riding skill application there can alleviate the issue also. No stress. So the chassis, completely without surprises. Confident, stable, absolutely lovely. Because it's a racetrack, trying to figure out whether the 5 bhp delta is adding up to something or not is a little bit challenging. But what this bike does, it seems to have like a slight weakness in the mid-range and then suddenly rushes to the red line. So for a lot of laps, I was bouncing off the rev limiter again and again and again until I got used to it.
Okay.
So it feels like it picks up, and then the pace just sort of slows a little bit, and as you're saying, oh, it's beginning to slow, then it suddenly shoots to the red line and now you're out of time.
So it has a bit of a dip. And
yeah, so if I were to show you my first sessions laps, I think the first 3, 4, 5 laps, I have a lot of misshifts. Misshifts in the sense I didn't shift on time. Right? And then the second lap, I had adapted to this, and my mental state was I will always short shift. Is what I'm processing it as. But when I feel like I'm short shifting, I'm actually shifting at the right time. So it feels like the bike has no sense of strain approaching red line, which is very nice. There's very little sense of vibration and strain from this, so it feels lovely. And then suddenly you're just banging off the rev limit. And I only did track mode, so I haven't tried any of the other modes yet. When it comes and on the street, we'll try the other things. So I had a really good time riding the bike. Am I blown away by that experience? Honestly, no.
The sense that I'm getting is, and that's the conversation pretty much if you think about it. He started off by saying that there's no change to the chassis, but the chassis has always been brilliant. And it's always been this magnanimous kind of chassis. You know, you do whatever you want and it's got your back.
Yeah.
And that was the incredible thing about this chassis, because even with the older Pilot, what are those? The previous Michelins they used to have?
Before the Road 5, yeah, some Pilot Street type.
Pilot Street. Those were definitely not.
No, they were average tires at best.
Yeah, very, very mediocre tires. But despite those tires, what you could do on the racetrack with that bike was just because of the freaking chassis.
Yeah.
It just was so confidence inspiring, so easy to ride, all of that. So now it's, despite the power increase and everything, it still feels like the chassis is the star and the engine is just kind of moving it along.
Yeah.
It's not taking up that starring role or balancing the brilliance of the chassis.
No, and I
with
think
the performance.
Yeah, I think you might think more of the engine in the street scenario because torque is up a little bit, horsepower is up a little bit. But in the racetrack environment where you're basically always in the top third of the revs, you're always in the lowest gear possible, etc., it doesn't add up to be noticeably more impressive than the old bike. You will notice the difference in refinement for sure. If I did in the old RR310 at this kind of, in this kind of angle, I would have definitely buzzed my hands in those 20-minute sessions. Whereas I came off the bike feeling like completely normal. So I think they're saying we've controlled the vibration, and they said controlled, and I think they have. We'll figure this out on the street. Okay. Now, quick shifter is awesome. We didn't try the cruise control naturally, but the cruise control on the RTR 310 was already awesome. So I'm not expecting an issue here. TVS will have done their usual little weirdnesses, like on the RTR 310 when you select cruise control, that's not enough. I have to confirm that I want to do this using one little application of the clutch or touching one of the brakes. That kind of little bit of unnecessary hurdles being created will still probably be there with this bike.
Does this also get the cooled seat and all of that?
Thankfully, no.
Okay.
Thankfully, no. So I was at the racetrack. I was not in the seat a lot. I was moving around and all of that. And it felt completely comfortable because nothing was trying to cool my butt by putting fans under my family jewels. That RTR seat is just atrocious. Anyway, so the point is, it was a good bike. It's still a good bike. It's now a good bike with more smoothness and a little bit more performance. On the street, I feel like it will translate to a better experience. But will it fundamentally change the fortunes of this bike? I am not convinced. Okay, and
you were talking about the BTO kits.
Yeah, and I want to talk about 3 specific things here. One, BTO kit. Do you need to get the adjustable suspension? Be sure that you want to spend that money. Okay, this bike starts at 2,75,000 rupees.
Okay.
Just for a reference point, the NS400Z is 185. Okay, the Triumphs are all sitting at the low twos.
And NS400Z is about a 40 horsepower?
It's a 40 horsepower bike.
Okay.
Right, and the Duke 250 is sitting at 2.5. Right, and the Duke 390 is 46 bhp now. That's sitting at 310. Okay, so 275 as a starting point for this bike is a very high starting point.
Right.
But this is still an extremely expensive motorcycle, and not just to buy, also by reputation to own. Parts are also not cheap. They've never been. Then if you add the quick shifter, you add another 15,000-16,000 rupees to it, which to me is the maximum that I would want to spend on this bike at all, because that combination works.
Okay.
Above that are certain paint jobs, which you pay extra for. Above that is the first BTO kit, which is primarily about the adjustable suspension. If you really think you're going to actually work with the suspension to find a better setting, only then spend that money, because the base suspension setup has never been terrible at all. It's always been in a good place, still is. Above that is the IMU equipped electronic suite, by which point this bike becomes more expensive than a 390 Duke, which makes no sense.
So how much does the IMU thingy cost?
It's 16 for one of those kits, and then you build another 18 on top for the second kit, and then another 4,000-5,000 rupees for the top paint job or whatever, right? By the time you finish doing this, it becomes 3,000 or 4,000 rupees more than a 390 Duke. And the 390 Duke doesn't have this design, etc., but it is a very nice chassis. That engine is now much smoother than it's ever been before. All the electronics are standard, and most of them work flawlessly, etc., etc. It just adds up, right?
And suspension is fantastic. The 390
yeah,
Duke.
and if the new RC390 was out, then we'd discuss that in more detail. But even the current RC390 in that sense still has more performance than this bike, and the chassis is actually pretty decent now also. So this has been an expensive bike, remains an expensive bike, which is why I think they sell, what, 300 of these a month? I don't think they're going to be selling more than 300 of these a month, because this new bike has arrived, right? And there's some of these marketing things that I just don't understand. For example, the winglets. 3 kilos of downforce is what you'll hear in the marketing talk. At what speed?
3 kilos.
3 kilos. At what speed?
100?
At the top speed.
Top speed?
Yeah. But the fact that you went to 100 is good, because they said it does become significant in terms of contributions to the feeling from 100 kilometers an hour.
3 kilos is, if you just scooched forward by like 2 centimeters and bent your elbows a bit more, you'd get
No, that's not the point. The point is, the more I think about this bike, the more it feels like TVS had to do this bike.
Why is that?
Because something else was supposed to happen or is supposed to happen, but it's not ready yet, so we need something.
Come on, you got to say what that is.
No, obviously not. I don't know what that is.
Okay.
Right? But it feels like, for example, what I mean by that is, every company believes that they need to keep the products updated and fresh and in the news and in the cycles, as it were, right? And they did the RR 310, and it didn't really go to plan, before which they did the Ronin, and that didn't go to plan. So their premium products have not really done as well. And if you think about it, TVS had a phase about, say, 3 years ago, and for the previous 5 years or 8 years of that, where every product was just like, yeah, awesome.
Yeah. They were hitting it out of the park.
Constantly.
I think up till 2020, till BS6 kicked in. I think that's when they did that little bit of a flutter with the retunes and all of that. Until then, everything was just top.
Correct. And even today, if you take any of their bikes, RTR 200 downwards, they're all actually very good products. All of them, without exception. And if you look at what they did with the Jupiter 110, if you haven't seen that MotorInc First, you could. They know what they're doing.
Correct.
It's the products above that have always caused a little bit of strife for them, right? So when the first 310s came out 7 years ago, the vibration, oh, what's going on?
Yeah.
Then they updated this 310, they controlled it, they added all of those electronics back, but it fundamentally changed the fortunes of the motorcycle. No, not really. Adding the RTR 310 to this kitty, is it going to add a lot of sales? No, they were selling 250, 300, they're going to maybe add another 250, 300, best case. And that's still just 600 units a month. And it's not like the BMW side of this has done any magic either, right? BMW sells less than 30,000 units globally a year, including what they sell in India. And in India, they have these press releases saying the 310s are now the most popular product in India. Yes. On Earth, actually, no.
What? Say again?
So BMW says the 310 is their most popular product in India. Well, yeah. Right. And globally, they say the R310 does really well. Does it? 28,000 units a year, the last annual report I read, and the next paragraph said what, 28,000 RRs and 35,000 or 60,000 GSs, I forget the exact number, right? So this project has not done well. This project is 11 years old. These bikes are 7 years old. So the question why I keep thinking TVS is buying time is because I can't see a logical reason why they are still 310s.
Yeah.
Right? You won't build a platform as little as 7 years ago without saying this platform can grow in size or reduce in size. You wouldn't do it. It doesn't make any sense. Which means at the very basic level, this platform could grow into a 350cc motorcycle or a 400cc motorcycle. If you can get 38 from a 313, you can certainly get a far more respectable performance figure if you grow this displacement by even as little as 35-40cc. Why has it not happened? It's a very, very odd thing to get stuck with.
It must be tied in with BMW, right? Because they don't want, BMW probably says that this is enough for us, and they're not going to re-engineer this engine just for themselves separately, because this is all being manufactured together, right?
Yeah, but I don't understand why BMW would also restrict themselves to 313 because this is what supposed to be an A2 license compliant kind of motorcycle. All the other A2 guys are sitting at close to 45 bhp outputs, and they are all doing well. Versus which the BMW isn't. The 310R and the 310GS aren't. So why would you draw yourself into this little box? Because what is so special about a 310?
So do you think it's time for an all-new product?
I think it has been time for an all-new product 3 years ago. Right? But whatever, I don't know the details, so I won't speculate. But the idea is, for some reason, this bike has to remain a 313 for the minute. And which is why I feel like this RR 310 is an improvement, no doubt about it. But I think it's buying time for something else. So I don't know, maybe TVS has like 9 launches next year, and that fill the gaps, right? Where there are good 250s. You remember we said the Ronin has 3 good bikes in it, except that when you put a mishmash of it, then it doesn't turn out so great. Maybe those 3 bikes are all next year. Maybe the 400 is next year. Maybe the ADV that we are hoping TVS will make is next year. Maybe the TVS X, which has technically been on sale for a while, will actually go on sale next. I don't know. But it feels like this bike is holding station for something that is going to happen next. Is it holding station well enough? Yes. But has that accrued to a commercially successful position for this motorcycle so far? No. And in that sense, I was reminded of how good the chassis is. I was so thrilled to discover that there's such a great racetrack. I'm very proud that Kowai or Coimbatore is now a city with 2 racetracks. I mean, who would have thought? Right? One on this side and one on that side.
Insane.
Right? One very challenging one because it's old and it's a tight and technical layout. One because it's a flowing up and down blind corners kind of layout. I love it. What a great thing. And this also means that Mumbai remains the center of India in terms of motorsport, because all the racetracks are 1500 kilometers from here. It's equidistant. You can go to anyone you like to travel the same distance. It's awesome.
Only 1500 kilometers.
Think about it.
It's the perfect travel distance.
Forget whether it's perfect or not, it's equal. I mean, you can choose BIC or MIC or Coast or Curry Motor Speedway, and you'll travel the exact same distance to get there. Tell me how many places on earth can you say, I live in a place where all the racetracks are the same distance from my house?
Yeah, just 1500 kilometers. Okay, cool. So price-wise, has it gone up significantly?
I think they've just marginally brought the prices down a little bit and rationalized it, is how I understand it. I honestly have not paid attention to the 310.
I know why. Yeah,
I haven't paid attention. I think this has become a little bit more rational than before, but I don't think it has become anywhere close to something that you'd say that looks like value for money. It's never been, still is not today, and I don't think they have a choice about it, one way or another.
Alrighty then. What else?
What else? In the same breath that I criticize the 310, I feel sad about it because it is a nice bike.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, I classify bikes saying that if somebody were to give it to me for free, what would you do? And there are bikes that I'd return. And there are bikes I'd be insulted to have been given. Right? This is a bike I would keep. I'm not convinced I would use it a lot after I kept it. Right? I wouldn't be like craving to ride it constantly, but I'd be happy to see it in my garage.
Nice bikes finish last.
But nice bikes finish last in this scenario because there will be a bike in there that you'll say, yeah, man, I really need to ride that thing.
Correct.
And it might be a minute after you just turned it off. And that's the emotion that the premium bikes have to create, right? Which this bike has never been able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And every single other detail remains the same. So all the switch gears are where they were. Levers have become adjustable now. That vertical thing is still there. That crowded little LCD cluster is still, color TFT is still crowded. There are still riding modes which still use 2 engine maps and 3 ABS maps and 2 traction control maps to make a permutation combination set. If you find it useful, you're welcome to it. And in the foreseeable future, Michelin Road 5s not going anywhere. They're a huge asset to this chassis. Make the most of it.
Awesome. So, quick summary?
Yes, please.
All right. Today, we've just spoken about the TVS Apache RR 310, which has been around for 7 years. And it's really hard to think of it as a 7-year-old motorcycle off the bat, but it has been around that long.
Yep.
I think credit to TVS because they've constantly updated it, refreshed it, whether it's with engineering updates, with fixes that needed to be done for, let's say, vibrations, or to just make it more exciting in terms of the appeal with decals and whatever you want to call them, like paint treatments, and of course the performance enhancement bits which have happened over the last 3-4 years as well under the TVS BTO program, which is built to order. So effectively this RR310 is the same as before. Its chassis is completely unchanged. The great news is that the Michelin Road 5s that came in with the BTOs a few years ago are still available today, despite whatever the government's barriers to that are. TVS has figured it out and it's available with the RR310, which is awesome. The engine is the area where the biggest change has happened, so to speak, because it has a higher compression ratio now. It has slightly different cam timings so that the engine is breathing differently because it's making more power, and it's also smoother than before because the piston is lighter by 11%. It's a few grams, but that's a lot when the piston is going up and down that fast all the time. So there's an improvement in performance, there's an improvement in refinement, and what Shumi said was that it's slightly something that you have to get your head around, because the performance is strong at the lower revs, but then it kind of dips a bit before it surges again. So it has a bit of a dip and then a surge again, which caught him off for the first session, but once he got used to it, he learned how to ride with it, which is to shift up a little bit earlier, and that worked well. This engine has always been friendly, which means you could be in a wrong gear, a higher gear than you need to be, and still pull out of a corner without any hassles. That continues to be the case. The chassis is the same as before, ultra confident, so much so that you can end up leaning it a lot more than you really need to without worrying about it, and which is why some people might run into clearance issues quite quickly. But the answer to that is open it up a little bit more and pick it up. You'll be able to fix that for the most part fairly well. So friendly, strong performance motorcycle, and as before, it looks the same. The only difference and the big talking point has been the winglets, and incredibly, they add 3 kilograms of downforce at 160 kilometers an hour.
You know what somebody commented once the press release had come out? It was on one of our other videos. He said, "Did you see the new RR310? I figure that you'll go park it in a parking lot and somebody will knock one of the windlags off." Right? And then they commented on TVS service, which doesn't have a great reputation. Right. And they said, and TVS service will take 4 months to get a replacement winglet for you. And in the meantime, you'll have to ride a bike with 1.5 kilos of downforce on one side and not enough on one side. What you gonna do?
Okay. So, aside from that, there have been changes to the ergonomics.
Oh, sorry. Somebody else at the racetrack also at Coast made a joke saying that the winglets, I don't know what they do. I said, okay, but they certainly protect the indicators from the rain.
Oh, really?
The indicators
are under that.
Like this.
Oh. Okay. So the winglets aside, this is slight tweaks to the ergonomics. You used to have 2 options of handlebars clip-ons. And what TVS have done now is given the more aggressive handlebar knee.
It's okay. It's still a handlebar. It's a clip-on, but it's a handlebar.
So what TVS have done now is they've given you the more aggressive set as the default, and you can opt for the more touring-oriented one as an option if you want that. The BTO kits remain as before, so you do get one which is for the suspension. It's a fair chunk of money, about 16,000 bucks, but as Shumi said, the base suspension is good. So if you want to invest in that, you have to be clear that you're actually going to utilize it or learn how to utilize it in the first place so that you get the best out of it, because it's already an expensive motorcycle, and adding these bits makes it quite unconvincing as you add more and more stuff.
Yeah, and I would add that you look at adjustable suspension as a way to fix a problem you're having, not like a acquisition in terms of I have the cool stuff, right? So if you had a motorcycle where the suspension setup was definitely inferior, then adding adjustable suspension gives you the opportunity to fix the inferiority, right? In this bike's case, it will work really well for a whole bunch of people. So unless you're exceptionally small and light, or you're exceptionally large and heavy, and therefore the stock suspension setting just doesn't work for you, this money is not money well spent.
Super. Aside from that, you also get a quick shifter now, which is a great quick shifter. It's similar to the one that you saw on the
Up and down.
RTR 310, and it works from 2,500 RPM all the way up to the red line, and it works well. So that's a good thing. It doesn't get a cool seat like the RTR 310. All the other equipment remains the same as we've seen with the RR 310 earlier, which means that phone-like screen and all the different maps for the ride modes and brakes and all of that remains the same. What else has changed is the price, which has gone down very slightly. And overall, if you add up the equipments, so yeah, the other BTO kits that we didn't talk about, we spoke about the IMU. No, we didn't speak about the IMU. So the IMU is another 18,000 rupees, which brings you cornering, ABS, and traction control and stuff like that. So when you add all of that up, this becomes slightly more expensive than the KTM 390 Duke, and that's what the real problem is, because this is a great motorcycle. The chassis has always been awesome, and with the more performance that it has now, it's become a keener motorcycle, but it's not fundamentally changed what the bike is, which is to say, it's a nice bike.
Yes, and the biggest challenge this bike has always had is that the value quotient was just off the charts in terms of, we expect this, and this bike is somewhere sitting here. And fundamentally, that has not changed in any way at all.
And Shumi senses that what TVS really need is an all-new RR310, which would be a 400cc or something like that.
At the same price.
Yeah, at a similar price point, so that it just has a better mix of chassis and performance, so that it becomes one exciting motorcycle, and not remain a nice motorcycle.
Yep.
And that's the thing, like with the 390 Duke, it's a great motorcycle on some fronts, it's fantastic on others, and it's all right on some. But what you remember of it is just how wild and exciting it is, as a combination of the chassis and the suspension. And that's the magic that the RR310 kind of still misses out on, even though it just gets better and better. Yeah.
What I would like you to do is, if I'm right and TVS is buying time to do some products for next year, what product would you like to see from TVS? Leave us a comment. We'll see where this discussion goes. I want to see how many people go towards retro-ish Ronin derivatives. And don't restrict yourself to the idea that it has to remain a 225. If you think it should be a 325, say it, right?
Is there any reason why they've not done the GS equivalent yet?
It would make sense for them to do it.
Because they've been the off-road riders.
But we've been saying this for 12 years now.
Yeah, but I mean, now that we're at the point where we're saying that it's time for them to bring a new platform altogether, right? And the easiest thing that what they've done constantly is RR310 and the G310.
It sounds cynical when I say it like this, Kartik, and I have nothing but respect for TVS's engineering, not so much for their marketing anymore. But if you think about how TVS works, think about all the ADVs that are on the market, and do you think there are enough vehicles to benchmark to understand exactly how to build the right ADV? Think about it.
They don't have to benchmark.
Think about it. If they were to benchmark the 390 Adventure as it is today, that bike would just get screwed up.
Yeah.
Because the 390 Adventure today is just wrong. And the new one will tell you what the right one is. The closest we've come to a reasonably good ADV is a Himalayan, which is not even a year old.
Correct.
So I don't think that TVS would logically think of launching an Adventure yet. Okay. And it's not a bad plan. Okay, there are two things you have to remember. One, being number one is a very expensive thing. Being number two is much less expensive, but can be extremely lucrative. And TVS knows this because the Jupiter is the number two scooter in the market. They have to do a lot less work than an Activa, which has to work to stay number one. Staying number two is not that challenging. One. Second, if you can have the patience to wait for the right vehicles to arrive so you can benchmark them, the engineering effort you have to put in to make the product fit exactly what you want to do is correct. And in some ways, if BMW and TVS, that is the European mentality and the Indian mentality, had gelled together more cohesively at the start, we would have gotten a better motorcycle out of this project at the beginning anyway. But 11 years is a long time for two people to figure out how to work with each other. Right. So what happens next from this project should be actually incredible. We just don't know why it has taken 7 years for us to be at the point where saying 11 saal ho gaye. Where is it?
Okay. You know, you did something interesting in that conversation.
What?
You said that Honda does a lot of work on the Activa. Just saying.
They do. They do. I didn't say they do engineering work. I didn't say, but I never meant.
Go with the G's.
I never meant. I never skipped, and I never implied that the work that they're putting into the Activa is engineer.
The badges are hard work, huh?
Yes. Do you know how much effort it is to go from 5G to 6G when you have to order like 2 million of those badges every year? Or whatever, 30 million of the I don't know the number. Do you know?
A lot of hard work.
Do you know how much effort it is to light up the moon?
No. Oh, yeah.
As a distributed signal processing algorithm where various activities wake up in the night and light up the moon, so everybody says, oh, nice moon.
Oh, God. They're moving it away from the Earth a little bit every time they hit it.
The photons are pushing the moon away. Baapre.
That many Activas we've got, yeah.
So, no, but think about it, right? The Splendor had to work really hard to stay number one. But the HF Deluxe, etc., which were not number one, which was just extremely popular in the top 10 list, they don't have that much work required. Protecting a leadership position is a lot of work. It's not easy.
Cool. Okay. So, don't expect that anytime soon.
No, I'm thinking, my feeling is this bike is buying time. And if this bike is buying time, that means something big is coming next. Because look, it's not a low effort project. It's not like they said the 2025 has 3 new color schemes and a new price and winglets. They did work on the engine. They did figure out the forged piston. Think about it. They figured out the forged piston thing for a motorcycle that barely sells 300 units a month. It's a lot of work in the supply chain for a very small result.
Actually, the amount of effort that would have gone into creating this is massive.
Exactly.
Right?
So if you're going to put in that much work into a product that has never really done well, it's not fundamentally changing the proposition of the product. It has to be buying time for something significant to come. Either it is one product or a slew of products or a series of products, whatever it is, but something is coming.
So let's hope it's good.
Yeah, we know that the Norton thing is moving.
Okay.
We know that they're working with Norton actively. We don't know if it is the BSA plan where Nortons will go to the UK first and stay there for 2 years before they come to India. We don't know any of these details. But we know Norton is moving, we know the electrics are moving, and we know they've not given up on the ICs, as many international organizations said they did and then suddenly returned back to ICs. We know they're busy. They're not an sit idle and have fun organization. They're very serious people.
Yeah.
When a serious organization like that puts out a product like this, you know either something went awry, which obviously they won't discuss. They're listed, they can't. Or they know that this was required and this may not have the most positive optics and outcomes, but it is required right now so that 6 months later when they're ready to go, then this is wiped out from memory itself. And it's okay, we'll wait. They make great products. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
Even this, I'm saying the price is the biggest issue, not the bike.
At what point would you buy it?
If, for example, the base version of this bike was 2.2 or 2.3 lakh rupees, what other sports bike would give you this mature, rounded set of abilities?
So you're saying sub 250 Duke?
Has to be.
Why? This has more power?
So what?
No, I'm just saying, I'm doing the Janta thing, right? More displacement.
Yeah.
More power.
Yeah.
More features.
Look at your face when you're saying that.
No, I'm just trying to think what all is there over the 250 Duke that... Why would you say it should be pegged under the 250?
Because the parts of the 250 Duke has always been cheaper than this motorcycles. I will make this back up in ownership cost.
Okay.
And remember...
It's not because you...
Listen, TVS is on the back foot here. And people who are on the back foot have to give up stuff. Okay, TVS service reputation is in the pits. And I have only started hearing from TVS that they've started to work on it. It has not been their tone for years together. It's just started now. TVS and Bajaj remain the two regressive organizations that say warranties are only for the first owner. This is not something that everybody in the industry is doing. Why are they doing this? Do they not like their customers just because they bought a used bike instead of their first bike? What kind of policies are these? These are people who have to give up a little ground to create equity. Right? TVS has very good equity in the scooter market. It has very good equity with the Apache 160, 180 kind of motorcycles. They've never built this in the premium segment.
So you're fundamentally saying, again, coming back to why you're pricing it under the 250 Duke is not because of, let's say, lack of character relative to the 250 Duke?
It's to get this thing going off the ground.
Just so that there's more incentive for people to try this over the 250 Duke. Otherwise, you would automatically pick the 250 Duke?
Many of us would.
Okay. Because the identity of the 250
Think
Duke
about
is
it
clear.
like this, Karthik. If this bike were to sell 1,000 units a month, that would represent a 300% jump in sales. That's a whole in India. I mean, look at our numbers, look at this bike's numbers, it's going nowhere. Products that are going nowhere.
How much does the Duke sell?
I forget what the Duke sells. I am saying look at this segment of 400s that have arrived and overtaken this bike comprehensively. It's not a matter of the individuals. It's a matter of the size of the pie.
If you're even thinking about the Triumphs, etc.
Yeah. Look at the size of that pie and look at what this bike has contributed to that pie. It's done nothing.
Correct.
How did the Triumph suddenly become a name and there is a number there and you're like, oh, okay, decent numbers. How are you saying that? Triumph took a hit first.
And the Triumphs are also 2.4. Like what we discussed last. The
Triumph took a hit first. They came in at 2.3 with a 400. And once that got established, now the T4 is coming and sitting at what? 2.17, 2.2. And then above that 20,000 odd rupees is now the Speed 400. They all took a step back to saying, hey, we're here. Please look at us. Please consider us. You tell me how many comments do we normally get, and we both see our comments pretty regularly. How many times have you seen the RR310 show up in a conversation unprompted at all?
I haven't seen one in quite some time now.
NS400Z? Daily. Maverick? Daily. Duke 200? Daily. Duke 250? Daily. 390? Daily. Scrambler 400X? Daily. Himalayan? Every single day.
Himalayan, yeah.
Guerrilla? Since it started out till today, every single day. Where's the TVS 310s? When we did the MotorInc First,
in fact, the RTR hasn't
when we did the MotorInc
at all.
Exactly, when we did the MotorInc First, there were lots of comments about the RTR 310s. Where are they today?
No.
When the RTR 310 story happened, where were the people asking questions about the RR 310? Except for the comments on that particular video. This bike is behind. It's on the back foot. It has to give something.
So there you go. If you have to push this, then it has to be on the price so that more people consider it, bring it into their consideration set and really get a taste of it that way, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm convinced you'll like the taste of it. Is it the most exciting bike? No, but it's a really, really likable machine.
Correct. Right. Very street friendly, travel friendly, all of that is there.
But as a package right now, what it gives, what it brings, what it's priced at, what the ownership experience will be like, what you'll go through at service, what you'll pay for the parts, it doesn't add up.
Alrighty then.
Okay.
Anything else to be added?
Yeah. Whenever you get an opportunity to go do a track day at Coast, whenever it happens, it's a must. It's a really good racetrack.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really good.
Looking forward. Chalo. Wrap it up.
Yeah. So that's the 2025 RR310. This is what we experienced over 2 sessions at a brand new racetrack, 20 odd minutes each. And it's not a super small racetrack, so enough opportunity to get a sense of what they've changed. I think fundamentally the changes are good, but fundamentally the proposition, which hasn't commercially clicked yet, will not click because it has not changed in any specific way. If there's anything we haven't covered and you have more questions, please do leave us a comment. We'll discuss them and answer as much as we can. And we've asked you one specific question. Assuming that this motorcycle is basically holding time until TVS reveals what they're doing next, what would you like to see next? And I'm asking that from 2 specific perspectives. One is Ronin kind of retro-ish machines as a family. What would you like to see next? And one is RR310, etc. More modern formats, including the missing ones like ADVs or whatever. What would you like to see next? What displacements, what prices, what expectations?
Give us your list.
Give us your list.
Thank you so much for watching.